Every other healthcare experience has trained you to expect long appointments, 60 minutes for physical therapy, 45 minutes for occupational therapy. The longer the session, the more it must be doing, though, right? But when you watch your child get a chiropractic adjustment that's only 2 minutes, your brain immediately throws up a red flag and you sit there thinking, wait, that's it? And that's the right question to ask, but the answer is going to flip everything you've been taught about healing on its head. You see, a neurologically focused adjustment isn't shorter because it's doing less. It's shorter because of how powerful the nervous system responds when we give it precise inputs. And if we add more, we would actually be overwhelming an already overwhelmed system. Once you understand the real mechanism behind what happens during those 2 minutes, the entire concept of time on the table stops being the metric that you're measuring with. What looks short is actually doing something extraordinary. And the proof of that shows up in the hours and days that follows. So today we want to talk about what a chiropractic adjustment actually is, but also what it isn't, and how a precise neurological input from an adjustment reaches the brainstem, the vagus nerve, and the cerebral cortex, and why pediatric adjustments are often short, but that's by design, and why frequency matters far more than duration when it comes to healing. And last but not least, how insight scans make the invisible nervous system visible to us. So I want to tell you a story about a powerful example that our profession documented that was at a level 3 NICU, not even in a chiropractic office. You see, a newborn baby boy suffered a traumatic birth injury that included a whiplash type injury to his upper neck and brainstem. There was a hypoxic brain injury and a condition called PPHN, persistent pulmonary hypertension of the newborn. Because he was hooked up to every machine and monitor you can imagine, the neurophysiological impact of those first gentle adjustments was visible to us in real time. His heart rate came down, his respiration improved, his oxygen levels rose, his whole body relaxed and released that lockdown tension. What happened in that NICU isn't just a one-time story, though. It's the same thing that happens quietly every single time a child gets a neurologically focused adjustment. You just can't always see it spelled out on a monitor the way it was that day. So what an adjustment is, a lot of times people think it's a pop or a crack, and that's the sound of gas being released from the joints, but it has nothing to do with whether or not the adjustment actually worked. The real action here isn't structural at all. It's a precise neurological signal that the structure sends to the brain. That specific input activates mechanoreceptors and proprioceptors that are all over the paraspinal musculature, and they carry the highest density of muscle spindles anywhere in the body. Now, that sensory input races up the spinal cord to the brainstem, the cerebellum, and the prefrontal cortex, giving the brain a clean read on the body's position, tension, and tone. The goal is to correct what we call subluxation. Now, this is a three-part pattern that includes physical misalignment, joint fixation, and neurological interference between the brain and the body. For children, the pressure used is really like we're checking an avocado or a tomato to see if it's ripe. It's gentle, it's specific, and it's appropriate for every stage of a child's life. So let's talk about the nervous system. How does one small input affect the entire nervous system and ultimately the entire body? The adjustment delivers a controlled burst of neurosensory input that the brain uses to recalibrate how it's processing information from the body. Now, that signal is going to reach the brainstem, and this is going to control heart rate and breathing and digestion. These are foundational systems that we're running every single minute of every single day. Now, the vagus nerve we mentioned, that's the parasympathetic engine. It shifts the body out of sympathetic dominance, which is that chronic fight or flight state where most kids are unfortunately living too much of their life. There was a 2016 study published in Neuroplasticity that showed adjustments produce measurable changes in prefrontal cortex activity. Now, this is the region of the brain that's responsible for executive functioning, attention, and autonomic regulation. And this is why we see from just one adjustment sometimes things that are unrelated, like sleep, digestion, immunity, and emotional regulation. The nervous system seems to better regulate and control those. Children with very different diagnoses often share the same underlying patterns of dysautonomia. And this is why those foundational steps in our care are so important and help them so much. So a common thing we get asked in the office is, why are pediatric adjustments so short? And this is really by design. You see, a child's nervous system can only absorb so much sensory input before it becomes overwhelmed and it starts to shut itself down. The example I give people in the office all the time is, if you opened up your computer and you opened up 15 different browser windows, a lot of times that's too many things for the computer to run at once, and everything starts to slow down, or the computer might even crash. Your child's brain is exactly the same. You see, a child stuck in sympathetic dominance is already overwhelmed by school, screens, sensory input, food sensitivities. There's minimal spare processing capacity available to them. So, if we add 30 to 60 minutes of hands on input, we would honestly trigger the same meltdown response that parents see when they try and do dental appointments sometimes, or they do the really long therapy sessions. But our precise input in that 90-second to 2 minute window that we're working with a child, the brain spends the next 24 to 72 hours really doing the work that we want it to do to release that stuck stress pattern from their nervous system. Sometimes the most healing we can do is to give the nervous system less to process, not more. Now, we want to talk about frequency here too, because this matters. You see, the brain rewires itself through what we call neuroplasticity. Now, neuroplasticity only has one defining rule that we have to abide by, and that's repetition. When we have 168 hours in a week, if a child is only getting 6 minutes on the table across a 2 to 3 visit span, that really leaves them almost 167 hours where their body has to do a lot of the work for them, but everything else seems to be fighting against them. So a higher frequency keeps the release of that nervous system stress from reloading itself, because if there's enough time and the stressors continue, then we see the body just kind of function back into its previous state. The adjustment isn't necessarily doing the healing. The adjustment is the catalyst that allows the brain and body to better communicate. And that's where healing happens between the visits. And that's something we talk about a lot. Now, the insight scans we use, how do they give us that roadmap? See, insight scans measure nervous system function through three objective tools. We have our heart rate variability tool, our surface electromyography, and our thermal scanning tool. Now, HRV, the heart rate variability, shows us the adaptability of the autonomic nervous system. So it really helps us look at vagal tone. The SEMG, it lets us know whether or not the child is stuck on the gas pedal, because it's going to show us the fatigue patterns within their neuromuscular system. And the thermal scan shows us where autonomic dysregulation is concentrated along the spine. We're looking for blocks of areas that show a lot of extra pressure, because two children with the same diagnosis can really show completely different scan patterns. And that's why personalization happens at the neurological level, not the symptomatic one, which means when your child comes in and they do their scans and their assessment, we're going to customize the recommendations that we need to get their nervous system based on their background and their patterns back in proper communication with the brain. The scans guide the care planning. They help us choose what technique to use, and they help us target those primary subluxation patterns. We're not guessing, we're testing. So ultimately, if your child's been through every protocol, they've done all the supplements, every therapy, but the missing piece feels deeper, that's because there's a reason. The foundation is neurological, and the right input delivered to the right place at the right frequency is what helps shift the entire trajectory of your child's healing. Your child doesn't need more labels, they need more answers. To get started with neurologically focused chiropractic care, click the link in our bio, send us a DM, or schedule directly with one of our doctors at Pure Chiropractic in Livonia. Get your scans, find the foundation, trust the frequency, get on the journey to health and healing for yourself and your family. We'll see you in the office soon.